Hi, this is John Costa with my co-host Sarah Riley, who is the Research Director at the Women's Research Centre. We're at the Doc Media Centre today and we're running our Disability Newsroom for the 3rd of December, International Day for Persons with Disability. And we're absolutely delighted with our first guest, who I'm going to let Sarah introduce because you guys are actually friends as well, which I think is great. So hopefully we're going to get some good information this afternoon.
Sounds dangerous. Yeah, we've got Hannah Webber, who is the Disability Sport Officer at the University of Nottingham. I'll get her to sort of expand more and sort of tell us a bit more about her role, but I think the work she does is fantastic, and I know she's definitely helped to promote sport both personally and also to other people. So Hannah, yes, if you'd like to first of all kick off with more about yourself and your role and sort of how you find things.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's nice to be on here chatting on this auspicious day. I have been Disability Sport Officer at the university for about 11 years now. My primary role is to support disabled students and to an extent staff to access whatever sport and fitness opportunities they want to. That's it in a nutshell. But I will support students whether they just want to go to the gym once a week or whether they want to go and compete at the Paralympics. So I have loads on my plate and keep very busy, but I absolutely love my job, which I think is why I've been kind of in post for well over 11 years. I'm one of the old timers at the university.
And what would you say then? So how do you think your roles sort of changed over the years then? Sort of, did you have an expectation when you first went into it, or how's that kind of gone about and stuff? Because obviously 11 years ago, I suppose we had sort of different priorities. We had the Olympics coming up in a couple of years, whilst now obviously we're way past the Paralympics and stuff. So how has your role evolved and stuff, would you say?
It's evolved quite a lot. So I first started, I took over from another lady and it was a part-time role at the university. And I think that Nottingham was one of the first universities to introduce that specific role. So they were ahead of their time on that. And I had no real expectations coming into it. I just really wanted to get into a sports development role, and I'd worked a little bit with British Para Swimming when I worked for the Swimming Association. And I knew that I really loved that area of sport. When I came in, there wasn't really a huge offer at the university. I think we had disability sport membership referrals, giving disabled students a discount on their sports membership fee, and a kind of a very kind of like small offer. But really it was starting a little bit from scratch in terms of kind of what we offered. And now I think my role has grown exponentially, and I've kind of, as I think we kind of have chatted about a little bit beforehand, kind of taking on a more inclusive remit, so working on not only supporting disabled students but students that identify as LGBT+, working kind of with the Black minority ethnic community as well. So my role has kind of grown and I absolutely love it. I love the variety that we get, and I love, even if I can only support and have a real impact on one disabled student in a year, that for me is job done. Like, you know, I think it's not a numbers game, it's about quality experience, and it's about removing those barriers and working with people to make sure they can access what they want to access when they want to access it, and hopefully benefit their general kind of well-being, their life at university, their experience of life at Nottingham.
And so if someone then wants to go on and pursue a particular sport, for example, are you then able to sort of signpost them where to go, talk about what the university's got, where else they could go, other facilities, and things like funding and access to equipment and stuff?
Yeah, to an extent. So we've got about 75 sports clubs at the university, so they're all run by students, and we're really trying to encourage our clubs to look at their offer and being as inclusive as they possibly can. So we do tend to, as a first port of call, signpost disabled students through to our clubs, and some hands up are not set up to deal with people with maybe more complex disabilities. In that case, we do tend to look for kind of look to our local partners and what other opportunities there are happening in the local community that we can signpost them through to. we're quite privileged in the respect that we have bought a reasonable amount of adaptive equipment over the years. We've got about 16 sports wheelchairs. So we do wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis. We do a bit of wheelchair handball, looking a bit of table tennis and badminton. So yeah, I think we're in quite a privileged position in that respect. And I think the opportunities have grown and developed over the years. Like we've got some really nice stories around what's happening with our climbing. So we got a little bit of alumni funding to develop our inclusive climbing offer, and we've had 2 students come through that program and have gone on to compete in the National Para Climbing Championships. One has gone on to the World Championships, and she's actually one of our sports scholars this year as well. So yeah, there's an opportunity here. I think we're quite privileged in respect of what we can offer.
Do you find that your students, when they arrive in the first year, you're the first time that they've had an opportunity to look at a broad spectrum of different sports? Up until that point, either their education or their parents or older brothers and sisters kind of they've done that because that's what they do, and you're the first person to really kind of open their eyes as to the possibility of other things that they could do.
Yeah, I think so. I think a big part of my job is communication and just making people more aware of what opportunities there are out there, and kind of breaking down maybe some preconceptions that new students coming in have of sport. I mean, especially if students have had a negative experience at school or at college, coming into university where there's like a massive offer can just seem a bit overwhelming, and they can be put off by that. So I think that's where I try to kind of develop those links and those one-to-one conversations with students and support them into kind of the club setup, if that's the right thing for them. We've also got within our clubs, we've got welfare officers on the club committees, so they're kind of the friendly face for disabled students coming into those clubs, if that's kind of where they want to go with things. But we've got some nice participation programs. So Sarah, I don't know if you remember Engage when you were at Nottingham.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But that's kind of quite a friendly program where you don't have to compete. It's just about playing a sport socially, more casually. If you don't know how to play a sport, they'll have student coaches teaching you how to learn the skills to be able to do it. And it's a lot less pressured, but it's quite a nice introduction into new sports. And we've had some really nice kind of, I don't like to call people stories, but there's kind of been some quite nice examples where disabled students have come in. For example, through our trampolining club, we had a student last year who was on the autistic spectrum, never really engaged with that much before, and kind of went and started doing trampolining, and then she competed in their national competition because they had a disability category in that, and changed person. Like, I've seen her at the start of her second year, totally changed person, like so much more confident and willing to look at other sports and try different things. So for me, that was just a really nice example of how sport can impact people and make that positive change for them.
No, yeah, I definitely think that's really true. And I think also it's just having that, as you said, that opportunity to try kind of sports that they've maybe not had access to before. I know from a personal perspective, when I tried some of the wheelchair sports, and because I find it hard to get like cardio, I just remember the exhilaration you suddenly feel when you're kind of in like a sports chair, and how quick it is, and you can do a team sport as well, which you might not necessarily be able to ordinarily. So I know that it's that opportunity is such a massive thing, but obviously your passion really helps as well, because it sort of makes us people want to get involved and to try these things, and I don't know, just make it seem possible to a large extent as well.
Yeah,
so definitely.
Sorry to interrupt. I just think it is overwhelming when you're coming into a new environment and you don't know people. We have a very big sports centre called David Ross Sports Village at Nottingham, and it's very overwhelming when you first walk in there. And I think I would be nervous if I was a first year student walking into that environment. So I totally understand. I should imagine that's exacerbated like 10-20 fold for disabled students that might be kind of a lot more anxious about whether we can kind of accommodate what they're looking for. So I totally get that, and I think it's just kind of building the confidence and just making people more aware, and that's where we have quite good links at Nottingham with the disability support team, with our mental health advisors, with our counselling service. We have wellbeing officers within our schools and our departments, so we make sure that we kind of a bit more linked up so we can get the word out there to people in different ways, and it's just not me and my sports gear going, yeah, come on and give it a try. It's people that maybe a little less, kind of feel a little less intimidating almost.
Because again, we don't really think necessarily about the social side, do we? The sort of, you know, making new friends, going out, all that kind of stuff. We tend to focus on the health benefits, or I'll look at that disabled person doing sport, as opposed to look at that person doing sport and enjoying it. Oh, by the way, it's great that they're able to participate. You know, it's almost like it's always the other way round, isn't it? You know, what we would, Sarah and I often talk about, you know, what is being normal. You know, I've never met a normal person, but, you know, normal people would be like, oh, I go down the gym because it's good for me, you know, and it's healthy and that kind of stuff. And I make friends. Well, suddenly you put a disabled person as that person on the poster, but all of those things become irrelevant because it's great that they're able to access this. And well, why isn't there the normalisation of the language? That's one of the barriers as well, isn't it? Really, other people's perception.
Yeah, massively. It's like we've got a wheelchair basketball club at Nottingham, and people think that they've been struggling. They struggled for numbers initially because people thought that they had to have a disability to join in, and wheelchair basketball is a sport in its own right. It's not about having a physical disability. It's about, you know, just get in a chair, give it a go. You know?
And it is very difficult. I've actually had a go at that and wheelchair rugby, and it's very, very difficult. You know, absolutely, you've got to be skilled at that.
Yeah, well, Sarah played in our varsity game, I think, didn't you, Sarah? One of our
first... did many years ago, yes. back in the day, yeah. No, that was great as well, and just to have that atmosphere and such forth really as well, which was really cool. Just yeah, it was an incredible experience, definitely. But having that team environment, and yeah, I think it can be kind of very, as you said, very intimidating to actually kind of go to these sort of things. And I think having that opportunity, like when we're trying the wheelchair basketball, you think, oh, you know, should I give it a go and everything, and actually just sort of just doing it and having it sort of friendly and accessible is really important. But I think also like things like the gym can be a very intimidating environment, and obviously sometimes like how will I do with the equipment, you know, how can I access certain things. So I think definitely, I know like I was helped initially on the buddy scheme, which was fantastic, and really quite an innovative thing with that. So and also recognizing that I can still use a lot of the equipment, it's just I might have to adjust it, being shown and helped how to do that really.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find gyms intimidating, and I think it's about building that confidence and that awareness. And I think we've don't mean to keep like, you know, big up in everyone, but our fitness team within our department are very good, and we do what we call supported fitness sessions, John. So, you know, we effectively buddy up a student with a fitness instructor, and they support them through a program of 6 to 8 weeks. And whether that be they just want to improve their fitness, just kind of help to manage their disability a bit more effectively, or just kind of train for a 5K race or whatever it might be, they'll work with that student to do that, and kind of meet them at the main reception if they're a bit overwhelmed by finding their way to the gym. And I know that's something that Sarah accessed quite regularly, and it does have a massive impact. It's been quite popular for us in terms of just building confidence of disabled people when it comes to accessing the gym.
I like that, because that's quite a holistic approach as well, isn't it? Because it's normally that additional stuff. The half an hour I spend with you in the gym as your buddy is what I get funding for, whereas in fact taking the time to meet you at the reception and kind of having that conversation and not rushing round and getting it done, they tend to be the things. If you were going to write a funding bid, there'd be additional extras, or that's what volunteers do, isn't it?
Yeah,
we're still getting to that point where inclusion should be everybody, not special funding for certain people to be included and get extra help, when in fact all that extra help is someone to train with.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like for certain disabilities there does need to be a little bit of extra, especially in the initial stages when you're just starting something new. So for us, I think that people are saying, why do you need specifically a disability sport officer? Why don't your sports development officers take on that remit? But selfishly, I don't want them to introduce that because I love my job. But in the ideal world, that's what it would be like. There would just be a sports development officer in the role that I'm in who covered everything from including more disabled people to, you know, people who identify as LGBT plus, to international students. You know, it's yeah, in an ideal world that would all be removed and it would just be kind of a one size fits all almost. But unfortunately, I think
you're back to people turning around and saying, well, are you happy for this vet who is also a doctor to do your brain surgery for you? Go, oh no, I want a specialist. I want a specialist who knows about me and my condition and all that. So, well, and
yeah,
this person has a disability sports.
And I think it's true though. It's about treating everybody as an individual, and I think that's probably what you're trying to get at. It's and everyone has different needs and kind of ambitions and abilities. You know, I have very poor fitness levels, so yeah. So I think it's just appreciating that, I think, a little bit more and just getting into that mindset.
It's interesting that you describe that as a privileged position because you've got this equipment. It actually sounds to me that, you know, we're actually lucky that you are able to take all of that equipment on and have it from a point of view where you're able to offer that, because really for these young people, this is the first time that maybe there's a sort of a taste of freedom when it comes to being able to manage themselves or their own money or their own time and all the things that, you know, first year students, bless them, and we've come across in all of our jobs, is normally the biggest challenge for them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's massively overwhelming when you're kind of moving away from home and having to kind of redevelop your own support network and figure out how to do your washing and feed yourself and get yourself to lectures on time. And obviously that's kind of been massively thrown up in the air this year. But yeah, it's hard for anybody, let alone if you've got a disability as well.
Well, I can't believe you've mentioned this year, so that's it. That's opened the door on the COVID-19 conversation.
Sorry. How many minutes in?
You did it. You did it. It wasn't us. You did it. So, I mean, what's been the impact on your role? Yeah, but what kind of opportunities has that allowed you to explore or maybe do differently you wouldn't normally have the time to do, for example?
It has impacted quite significantly in terms of what we can offer. For example, our supported fitness sessions, we've not really been able to offer those because we've had to get people to pre-book to come into the gyms because we can only have a fixed capacity and we need to kind of keep the social distance. Some of the clubs have not been really kind of training or kind of meeting as often as they can because of their national governing body guidance. In terms of kind of what we've been able to do, we had a kind of a limited program. I think we've been doing a lot more stuff around kind of mental health awareness. For me, that's been kind of quite a key thing because I think a lot of people are struggling at the moment, and just kind of trying to find workarounds with that. Doing quite a lot of stuff online. We've been trying to develop some kind of online inclusive fitness classes that we've kind of put on our Facebook page. Yeah, I think it's been really tough, I would say. And also it's kind of just being mindful that some people have been shielding. Some people are naturally very nervous about coming out of that shielding bubble and kind of getting back into the real world. It's quite a scary prospect. But then on the other hand, you have some students that are maybe kind of just really want to kind of get back in there and get exercising. So it's been really hard, actually, I think. And I'm hoping that we can kind of get some more sessions on in the next term, fingers crossed, and kind of really kind of start building up some engagement again, because we've had, like, in terms of the students I've had referred through to me, it's been a noticeable kind of downward turn compared to this time last year. So yeah, I think people are a lot more nervous about actually making that step into the sports centres.
I read a really interesting article about the impact on elite athletes of the cancellation of the Olympics and the Paralympics earlier in the year in Tokyo, because people, it's not like you're just doing your sport and then you move it forward a year. I mean, anybody who's watched any of these kind of terrifying documentaries about elite sport suddenly realise that these people train for that moment. Like,
Yeah.
The British and then the Europeans and then the worlds, and then it's all that. I mean, do you think that it's almost like a lost generation from a point of view of that? We got that when it comes to people participating in sports at all levels. We've got this generation that will always be affected by the impact of COVID-19 and not being able to exercise.
To an extent, I think so. I think this is where, I hate using the word resilience, but I think that's where it will kind of show, really show its value. I don't think we've lost them. I think there's some very frustrated and slightly disenfranchised students out there, but I think and I think it will take time to build up that confidence and that trust in coming back into the sports centres and re-engaging with physical activity and sport. But with regard to kind of more performance athletes, I know that some have been in training and there have been some exceptions made for them so that they can continue that. But yeah, I think putting the kind of Paralympics back a year is kind of definitely kind of sent people off in a bit of a wobble, in terms of it's kind of a 5-year kind of training program rather than a 4-year. And
then suddenly someone who was going to retire at Tokyo is suddenly like, I've got to carry on doing this for another year, and then he's not able to actually participate, to be at a level that you could compete internationally, even if they do it next summer, and fingers crossed, hopefully they do. It's not like we went back to normal and then they were able to train for a year. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's fascinating time.
It is really interesting. And we've had to give up quite a lot of our performance space just to accommodate extra gym goers. So those performance athletes that we've got coming in have had to share their kind of private space with all of our members. So in that respect, they've maybe not been able to kind of focus and train in the way that they normally would do. So, and I know we've got a wheelchair basketball scholar at Nottingham, and he's on the fringes of the GB squad, and he's been really frustrated that he's not been able to get in and train, and that's because of the guidance from his national governing body, not because we're saying you can't come in. It's because that's what they're telling us, and some of those players naturally are kind of have to be a little bit more cautious in terms of how they train and where they train. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times, and I think we probably won't see the kind of medium to longer term impacts for a little bit, the true impacts anyway.
So I have one final question. Sarah, have you got a final question, or do you want to come to you for final comments? What would you want to do?
Yeah, I know you've kind of answered a couple of the questions I was going to ask as well, though, to be honest. Like, I know I was going to explore a bit more about the mental health side of things and ask about your welfare in sport, and sort of how you kind of the importance of sport for the positive mental health. But it sounds like obviously that level of things has had to be really ramped up this year to try and accommodate more people, and I suppose you want people to get involved, but obviously it's sort of having that availability and that kind of capacity really as well to kind of do that, definitely. I also know that this is more of a with Bucks, kind of like your the sort of university and colleges sports kind of body. How long would you say that they've now become a lot more inclusive when it comes to disability sport, as well as rather than it just being because I know I'm sure I remember a couple of years ago you can actually start, that's actually used as part of the tallies to help with the sports. I'll let you explain a bit more, because obviously I'm not the expert.
So Bucks is British Universities and Colleges Sport body. So they basically at the moment run competitive leagues and kind of one-off national competitions, as well as kind of encouraging a lot of university to focus on their participation programs and developing that side of their offer. I currently sit on the Bucks Inclusion Board as the disability sport lead. Heaven help them. And I think I would say over the last year or two, we have seen quite a noticeable difference in terms of what they're offering. There's been a lot more para and disability sports coming into the competition program. And it's kind of just encouraging those sports and those national governing bodies to think a little bit outside the box in terms of what they offer disabled students. And there's also been a lot more funding coming in to support kind of inclusive and participative sporting programs. So there's quite a lot of stuff going on around mental health awareness and sport. So I think on the inclusion piece, Bucks is really starting to do a lot more and recognise the importance of encouraging that within their member institutions.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
It is a good thing, indeed. And obviously, I'm sure we're going to mention that you're nominated for the Unsung Hero Award with books and everything. So
Thank you.
fingers and toes crossed that you'll get that, as I know it's fantastic what you do at the university and everything.
Thank you.
Right. So one final question for me, I don't know if that's all right. I've done some work in the past with the purple pound, sort of, this view that there's a green pound for the environment, there's a pink pound obviously for the LGBTQ plus community, and there's a purple pound around disability. And I've done quite a lot of stuff with my partner Tina with the High Cross around retailers and stuff, why they should be interested in the fact that this is kind of the value of the purple pound for people spending it. And I remember having conversations with some people that ran cafes and restaurants, and obviously the barrier to access is always like, I can't get a ramp, or we've got a step, there's nothing I can do, these kind of things. And a lot of it was about how you arrange the seating. So if, for example, you were going to go out and there was a group of students or a family, for example, were going to go out and celebrate a disabled student's graduation, then they're not going to come for the celebration meal to your restaurant because they can't get in. You know what I mean? So the important person. Now, if they were going to go out and have a night out, if they really are friends, they're going to go where they can all go. Yeah. So you're talking about, well, you're turning away this pound by not being accessible. What kind of things are you seeing when it comes to students leaving university after having an inclusive experience and access when it comes to sport, to going out into the outside world? Are we seeing a change brought about by a successful Paralympics and people like Johnny Peacock and all that becoming personalities? Are we seeing a change when it comes to sport generally, when it comes to the access of people with...
I think yes, but I think I live in quite a privileged bubble. I think we're very lucky within the university at Nottingham that we've got quite a lot on offer, and we are supported from a senior management, from our pro vice chancellor, right, for equality, diversity, inclusion, right down to kind of our sports centre attendance. In terms of like, I actually volunteered at the Paralympics in London, and I think you did notice a massive change in the way disabled people were viewed, particularly in sport in particular. I've got this really, really nice story. Sorry, I'm going to ramble on a little bit, but
a final story. That's good. We're going to end on a story. That's good.
Yeah. So I was officiating at the goal ball, but I came out one night and I was standing outside the athletics stadium, and it was the night that Richard Whitehead won his 200 gold. And the noise was phenomenal. It was amazing. But then there were some little kids outside and they were running. Richard kind of runs from the hip, so he's got a very distinctive leg action. And they were running like non-disabled kids were running like Richard, not because they were taking the mickey, but because they were so inspired by his performance and what he had achieved. And I think for me that was a real kind of like, that's really stuck in my head as a real positive. And I think we have seen it rippling out. I still think there's work to be done, But yeah, I think in terms of students leaving university, I think we spoke a little bit before we started recording about a student called Molly. She came to university. She'd done a bit of ballet before she came and a bit of yoga, and we got her playing goalball. We got her involved in, I think she tried trampolining as well, and horse riding, and really kind of broadened her horizons. And I think that I like to think it played a little part in kind of making her more confident in her own life and kind of what she could do. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, John. I feel like
Well, I think so. I mean, your story did really well, because it kind of made me think about something that we normally forget about, which is where do you start talking about disability and access and inclusion? And of course, it's not when you're an adult, because then you're set in your ways, aren't you? It's at primary school probably where you're starting to make the biggest difference. And really, if you started with all of those things before maybe we become colorblind, or we see disability, or we see difference, or any of these kind of things, everyone just kind of gets on. Maybe it's how do we put something into primary school education that is then put into secondary education, that needs to change away from passing exams to preparing people for the world that we live in today. Maybe it's a bigger thing. I know it's quite a bigger statement, but I said you guys play a role really when by the time the student comes to you at the age of 18, they've already been either institutionalized or told what they can or they can't do, and you offer them this opportunity. And it seems to me more than the privilege is to see the opportunities that you can give to these people. I think so. It's an amazing role that you play.
Thank you.
And it's great talking to you and inspiring talking to you, because day in, day out, that you're making sure that these people are at the centre of being able to access and change their own abilities and maybe their own mental health and well-being and value and worth of themselves before they go out into the outside world alongside their degree. I think that's what's great about it.
I think it's got to be a very person-centric approach, and like I really liked what you were saying, that when do you actually start seeing those differences? Like I remember as a kid, I grew up in Fiji, and I didn't realize that their kids had different color skin, and they were perceived as different. They were just my mates. When does that become a thing, that you start kind of almost pigeonholing people and noticing their differences, and kind of, I don't know, it is really interesting. Definitely one for another time. But
well, yeah, and I think this is the value of sport as well, isn't it? It's not just about the health and fitness element. It's what does it teach us about other stuff? It's like good sportsmanship awards and things like this. You know what I mean? Whenever you see good sportsmanship on a Facebook video, you think, oh, that's fantastic. And you go, yeah, but what does that tell us about a wider society that we could learn from? Which is, well, actually, why are we inclusive on a sports field for the Olympics, and why I believe they are still relevant and important beyond the politics to how we treat people coming across the channel. So having a refugee team, for example, or people that have claimed they're almost like stateless and they can still compete at the Olympics. That's a really important message. How are we explaining that team to younger people and people? Obviously, Twitter isn't the way to do it, so we have to kind of drop it down even more into conversations, don't you? Which is kind of what we're having today. So it's great.
Yeah, no, I just do think it's really interesting, and I think, like, I love, for example, I know Sarah played quite a lot of wheelchair tennis when she was at the uni, and that's naturally quite an inclusive sport, where they kind of, on a performance level, sometimes they do mixed doubles, but by mixed doubles they have a wheelchair player and a standing player, and they kind of try and break down the barriers that way, and then they're starting to develop visually impaired tennis, and there is some really good stuff going on, and I think being able to break down those barriers even further will hopefully have some kind of permutations kind of in the wider society. I don't know. You can dream, can't you?
Indeed. No, but I think that is really true. And I suppose people, rather than looking at oh, you can't do that because you need this change, it's like, how can we include more people to do these things? And it's just even just the way you frame the different types of sport, what slight adjustments are needed so we can have more people. Because I think if you naturally have people with and without disabilities playing sport side by side, then people stop seeing the differences because they're just playing sport together and stuff. And I think that's really, really important moving forward. And both from like kind of the people partaking and the young people, as well as kind of people who are a bit older, who just, just sort of open expand your horizons and sort of think, well, what can we do? Because I think that's
Yeah.
definitely the best way forward. Yeah,
Exactly. Put the positive spin on it.
Definitely.
Well, lovely. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time.
That's all right. It was good
Sarah
fun.
and I
Thank
today.
you.
The first
Thank
of
you.
many, hopefully.
Oh, fingers crossed. I've enjoyed it, and I've nearly finished my cup of tea.
There you go. Never longer than a cup of tea's worth. That's all right. That's a good way for us to do our newsrooms, I think. Never longer than a cup of tea.
Tea
Sounds
timing,
good.
yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks
Bye.
a lot.
Bye.
See ya.